Humans love to do things together. Mini-golf, bowling, apportioning blame. From villagers armed with pitchforks to modern-day Twitter pylons. There's something deeply gratifying about holding someone responsible when things go wrong. Partly, it just feels fair. Whoever screwed up should suffer for the harm they caused. But it's also effective. Punishing the offender teaches them and others not to do it again, making the whole system better. This all seems pretty self-evident, but is it right? Imagine you get an email from your bank. Your private information has been stolen in a data breach. In reality, it hasn't. Your data's fine. The message was sent by mistake when someone was testing a mass emailing system. But you and the other 1,000 people who received this email don't know that yet. In minutes, the bank is swamped with furious calls and their stock price plunges. Innocent mistake or not, these are real-world consequences, and shareholders are demanding action. A developer, let's call him Dave, is promptly identified as responsible and fired. Now, is this fair? Well, if Dave was solely responsible, maybe. But things are rarely that neat. Why was a test system able to send real messages? How did it have access to customers' emails? Weren't there procedures in place to prevent this? As soon as we look beyond the simple, satisfying story of Dave screwed up, we see that any mistake he made was probably one link in a chain of errors. He was just in the hot seat when that chain finally broke, which means blaming him starts to look like a simplistic solution to a complex problem. What's more, Dave has done his job perfectly for 10 years. Does one error really cancel out the value he's brought to the company over that time? Doesn't sound that fair to me. But was firing him at least effective? Did it make things better? It's hard to see how it could. If the real problem was the system as a whole, then focusing on one person distracts us from the big picture. The real issues won't get addressed, and this is all bound to happen again. But even if it was down to Dave, his last decade of great work implies this mistake was a one-off. And knowing the damage it's caused, he's probably going to do everything he can not to repeat it. That makes him a more valuable member of the team, not a liability. So much for fairness and effectiveness then. However satisfying it might feel, the blame game simply doesn't make sense because it ignores a fundamental truth. Mistakes are inevitable. They're part of being human. Obviously, we should try to minimize them, but punishing people for dropping the ball doesn't do that because it misses the point. Our problem isn't making mistakes, it's not learning from them. So, what's the alternative? One man with an answer to that question is Sidney Dekker, a leading academic and part-time pilot. His theory, embraced by organizations from the British NHS to the aviation industry and even the online store Etsy, outlines a system that increases both fairness and performance in a way that simply pointing the finger can't. He calls it just culture. It starts with a simple idea. If you want to learn from mistakes, you need to know about them. The problem is, this requires people to be open about mishaps and near misses, which will never happen if everyone's desperate to cover up problems out of fear of being punished for them. Just Culture remedies this by shifting the emphasis from who's to blame to how did this happen, seeking a deeper understanding of the problem to shape what should be done differently in future. And part of this approach means not rushing to blame or punish those who make mistakes or come forward to highlight problems. Now, you might be thinking, this just sounds like letting people off the hook. But the point isn't to be lovely to everyone and excuse absolutely anything. It's to distinguish between blame and accountability. In a just culture, Dave would still be accountable for his actions. Literally, he has to give an account of what he did and why. And if he refuses, then he's probably still going to end up without a job. But if that happens, it'll be because he wasn't willing to learn from his mistake or help others to, not because he was a convenient scapegoat. In this sense, giving him the confidence to be open about what's happened actually makes him more accountable, not less. Just culture is a powerful idea, but not necessarily an easy one to adopt. It can feel counterintuitive, and it takes courage and cooperation at every level of an organization. In some industries, liability is a legal issue and a public one, which makes simple tales of blame and punishment very appealing. But if our focus is really on fairness and performance, then those stories won't serve us in the long run. And Just Culture presents an effective alternative, which could make a difference anywhere mistakes happen, which is everywhere.